I want to thank CEREDEM for inviting me and other panelists and other participants. Uh, I think the issues are very clear, and the findings of your research, of the research of the team, actually could be generalized with the development on ground. Even after concluding the study, the reality on ground shows that the attack strategies by the various contenders, particularly the major contenders, is still on the rise. Be that it may, it is important for us to note that their supporters are not also helping matters. As the issues are aggravating among the various contenders, their supporters are actually showing that the democracy is not being deepened in terms of democratic values and democratic knowledge. That election is just part of the process that could make democracy engender development. So, as it were, it is important that stakeholders, uh, supporters of political parties, contenders, actually see election or campaigning as the way of convening their programs, policies to the public and likely to the electorate that actually votes them into power. And issues of concern, part of what was identified by the study is clear that most of the contenders, particularly the major contenders in their campaigns, they are not focusing on the real issues that affect average Nigerians. In fact, if you situate their campaigns vis-a-vis current economic happenings, you see likely that the focus is not really on the issue. One of the issues that is pressing now that we expect the major contenders while campaigning to focus on should be the issue of debt sustainability. The last budget that was just approved, 29% of the budget will go into debt servicing. And just yesterday, the Director General of the Debt Management Office actually pointed out that whoever is taking power by June, will inherit debts that would amount to over 77 trillion naira. And that has implications. Those campaigning should be able to tell us what they want to do. How are they going to reduce the debt burden? What strategies are they going to do to put in place to increase the revenue such that the tax, particularly from non-oil sector, the tax to expenditure level could reduce, or sorry, could increase. What they could get from tax revenue, non-oil revenue could increase so that our debt burden can also reduce. What we see they are emphasizing now, particularly part of the campaign, which you also pointed out, are issues that do not affect the socio-economic well-being of our people. When they talk about infrastructure, they are not actually specifics, but they are not coming up with specifics as to which infrastructure, how they are going to also finance the infrastructure, and what impact the infrastructure is going to have. They are not focusing on the issue of poverty. How many people are they going to take out of poverty? What strategies are they going to deploy to take people out of poverty? Just like the World Bank identified, many Nigerians are also moving deeply into the poverty net. But the campaigns are not focusing on some of these core issues that will affect an average Nigerian that will vote them into power. So I think the findings, the research actually corroborates the fact that those seeking for offices, particularly presidential office in the country, are not focusing on issue. They are actually focusing, attacking themselves, particularly attacking history, education history, health of individuals and that has been the focus. The focus on competency has not been there, that this man can actually deliver because he has this. Some of the stories that are revolving around candidates has to do with some of their past performance as vice presidents, as governors of states, as ministers of defense, and the likes. So the narrative has to do with what do you want to do for an average Nigerian? Where do you want to reposition? How do you want to reposition the country? What are you going to do differently that will better the lot of an average Nigerian? But the emphasis has been what individuals are doing. What is the health status of individual? Why are you seeking medical services abroad? When one of the presidential candidates went to Chatham House, why he could not answer question was the focus, not the content of the questions that were even asked. So some of these issues, I think the electorates need to be addressed so that they can readdress and refocus the debate and the narrative around the core issues that can better the socio-economic life of an average Nigerian. If you look at some of the issues that are critical, the university system was shut for more than 8 months. We were expecting that the candidates will come up with solutions. And some of the things some of the candidates were actually saying or were actually putting up as part of their campaign as solution to some of those problems were not even deep. They were just on the surface. They were ideas that failed in the 80s and the 90s, and they were not actually saying anything in concrete terms. We have out of school children in different states in the country. So what are they going to do differently to bring those children back to school? The university system, where are they going to get fund? The polytechnics, what are they going to do differently that will make the university system be a center that can engender development and growth in the next 4 years? So the core issues that can bring development, that can bring growth. In fact, they were not even discussing international issues. Are they going to relate with our international partners? Are they going to relate with China? Are they going to relate with the US and other development partners? These are there was African America summit recently. None of the candidates actually talked about that issue, and it has implications. If you have development partners, you are getting funding for some infrastructure from China, the US is saying don't go in that direction. What are you going to do differently? How are you going to manage those partners? So these are core issues that I think the candidates, the electorates, and their supporters actually need to focus on. But what we have observed, as you have actually pointed out in your reports, is that they were focusing on other non-fundamental issues that can improve the livelihood and the welfare of an average Nigerian. Thank you.
From our reports in the last 3 months, the first 2 months, the attack strategy is more compared to their claim. And we've defined attack as a situation where the candidates and their political parties are using foul language, trying to talk about the incompetency, personality disparagement of opposition, among others, dominates in both the digital public sphere and the non-digital public sphere. Now it has improved. We now have more of a claim. Our definition of our claim here is that what their competency, what they will do, how they will solve issues. They are now focusing. They're trying to promote themselves rather than attacking or defending. It's now 42%, while attack is 34%, and defense is 22.3%. So what do you think is responsible for for this? Dr. Yinusa, over to you.
Thank you very much. Most of the narrative is actually changing towards what they have done in the past and what they want to do. Immediately, if you observe, they start releasing their campaign manifestos, and some emerging issues were coming up, and the candidates need to actually package themselves. Permit me to use that word. that could be responsible for some of the change in narrative that we are experiencing, to show that they have something to offer, though it might not be what Nigerians actually are desiring. Uh, that could be responsible for some of their new claims. For instance, if you look at the issue of subsidy, in one of the business meetings in Lagos, one of the contestants actually came to the open while discussing with some business groups in Lagos to say, this is what I'm capable of doing, this is what I will do. So, and the kind of audience they also talk to determines the kind of narrative. When you observe when they travel abroad to Chatham House, and when they knew Nigerians were watching, and they could see the trend of what some stakeholders, particularly the business groups, they know they are key, because the way the economy is structured, you don't play with the business groups. So you must give them some assurances, or give narrative that could be of interest to them. And also the media actually shape the narrative. You observe consistently some of the traditional media houses did some engagements, ranging from channels to Arise TV. They did some engagement with some of the core or key participants for several weeks. And those discussions, the questions they were asking, were also part of those things that were shaping some of the narrative in their campaign. So those are some of the things I could still identify that actually influenced their change in narrative. If you observe at the time, some of the candidates, some individuals, some oppositions went even to their school to actually verify the academic claims. So that's also pushed some of the candidates out to say, I have this degree and I have capacity to do this, I've done this before. So somebody at a point, I could remember one of the media houses, he was asked, what has he done before he joined politics? He had no choice to also give a background of his academic background, his business background, and the successes, acclaimed successes he had done. And that also shaped the narrative. And at a point, one of the subnational head, one of the governors in Southeast, actually also shaped the narrative when he came out to make some position, particularly, specifically the case of Anambra. So that also influenced the narrative of one of the prominent candidates to actually demonstrate while campaigning that he has capacity, that he has demonstrated capacity in that state, and he has capacity to oversee the Nigerian state. So I think some of those things were some of the things I could see that shape the acclaimed narrative of most of the contending parties.
You mentioned the other time about that even based on our reports, that the candidates, the supporters, and the political parties are not focusing on issues that matters. And you mentioned issue of infrastructure, unemployment. Specifically, you mentioned the way the candidate responded to the strike by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, and how they are going to resolve those issues. So, what do you think is the solution to ensure that political parties, their candidates and supporters focus on the issues that matters? So what do you think is the solution? What are the roles of stakeholders to ensure that candidates, their supporters, and parties focus on the issues that matters? Dr. Yinusa.
Well, thank you very much. I think the critical stakeholders in this campaign activities and program within the next few days or weeks that we have before election, the civil society have roles to play. The space of the civil society in terms of shaping, engaging, and discussing with the populace. That space is actually missing because the civil society is supposed to devolve into the society where you have the peasants, you have the market women, you have the people at the grassroots who can ask questions. For instance, the next 10 days or so, or I'm aware with the news today that the president will be moving to 10 states. There is nobody who will be asking questions or shaping the thought of the campaigns other than the people at the grassroots, because they are going to meet people at the grassroots. The variable or the actor that can interact closely with the people at the grassroots are the civil society. So the society needs to help to shape the narrative through the people, through the grassroots network. Also, the media is key, particularly the traditional media. The social media is there, but what we observe from some of the feedback of even some of the presidential candidates is that their concern about the social media is just minimal. That's the people on ground is their interest. The social media is still very critical, but the core traditional media has roles to play. The kind of narrative, they have a role to shape that narrative. There are major programs on national TV that whatever happened in those programs shape the narrative. So the media also have very significant role to play to shape the narrative so that the presidential candidate can focus on the core that will affect the Nigerian people. Also, the campaign councils of some of these presidential candidates need a kind of interaction. They need to interact with other stakeholders, the civil society, the media. They need to raise some concerns that can make them shape. Like CEREDEM, for instance, your findings is what you should also get across to some of these major contesting political parties, that when they see your findings, that could perhaps shape the narrative that what you have documented over the various months shows that they are not focusing on the core issues. They can have some of those core issues in their detailed manifesto or their campaign document, but to show to them that the Nigerian public, you are not giving those narrative as to what is expected that can better their lot. So the CEREDEM and the other civil actors, non-state actors, will also reach out to the campaign councils or campaign teams of some of these political parties or politicians. Also, the academia as a collective, we also have roles to play by writing, by discussing, by engaging. Their professional bodies within the academia and outside the academia need to also engage them more. Various stakeholders in that sector. You mentioned the issue of the educational sector, where ASU had to shut down for 8 months. There is a need for an interface, because what is obvious is that whoever comes on board come May, June will inherit the 2023 budget, and it might be difficult to add to that budget. And whatever you want to do for any sector must be contained in that budget, except you want to wait till 2024. As we speak now, what made those university lecturers to shut down? We need to ask, has those issues been addressed? If they are not being addressed, when you have the opportunity to be on the #1 seat, what are you going to do to address it? What are the 1, 2, 3, 4 things you need to do? Just like when we had the Jonathan government, he had a round table with them and was able to solve part of the problem. But in the last few years, that has not happened. So there is a need to actually engage stakeholders. The academia need to reach out. They need to engage more. They need to write. They need to talk to the power center. They need to do the power mapping and reach out to the various political parties and the major contending parties as to this is what is needed. Good enough, this is there in the budget. Education is rated #2 in terms of spending for 2023, but is one thing to budget, another thing is to translate to reality. So some of those issues are key, and the critical stakeholders, like I mentioned, the civil society, the media, the academia, the political parties through their campaign team, campaign councils are very critical. The electorate, just like the way we are doing massive sensitization on PVCs, the electorate too, we need to rechannel their energy so that they can ask the right questions. If they ask the right questions, the politicians will be prepared to change the narrative. They will be prepared to do the needful in terms of the messages that they will pass across to the various stakeholders, particularly the general populace. Thank you.
I want to thank CEREDEM Africa and PAN for this wonderful effort they are making about electoral politics in Nigeria. What they are doing is what any serious society organization should do in the spirit of sustaining Nigerian democracy. And I can say that in the last few months, the two organizations are becoming very strong voices within the civil society. Let me make two quick remarks. The first is on the issue of the low engagement of political parties and the candidates. The engagement by parties and candidates of voters. Dr. Yinusa said that is simply he pointed out to the fact that Nigerian politics is not issue-based, that it's issue-free. That is not a recent phenomenon. It has been part of us since the Second Republic, if I'm correct. And the consequence of that is that an average Nigerian does not really expect much from a Nigerian politician. All those promises that they make, there's a tendency among the Nigerian people that at the end of the day, if they eventually capture power, they might not likely implement those promises. And that's what rose up the issue of vote trading. That if this guy is not going to do anything to protect our interests when he gets to power, why don't we get him to do lots of money for us so that before he gets to public office, we would have collected our own share from him. But there's a need for a lot of voter education on the part of society organizations to let people know that it pays Nigerian citizens to compel politicians, elective office holders, to do what they promise for the collective being of everybody, rather than collecting 10,000 naira, 5,000 naira from them. So it is true that what we have seen in the last 3 months, as the report demonstrates, that Nigerian politicians, particularly those who are the gladiators for the presidential election of next month, they have done little to engage the people on vital issues that have direct bearing on their well-being. Rather, they are focusing issues on matters that do not really bear on the welfare of the people. But like I said, that should not be a surprise. But one thing that gladdens my heart about the report is the fact that the report has demonstrated that there has been a declining spiral of attack in the current month compared to the 2 previous months. I think that is very commendable. And we hope that our politicians will keep up this as we approach the election. Because I tend to believe that the attacks may be on the rise in about a week or two to the election. But if there's a lot of pressure on those who are contesting the election, particularly through the instrumentality of a National Peace Committee of Hassan Kuka and General Salam Abubakar, then we might be able to bring down the attack again. So the election is coming, and all of us have a stake in ensuring that that election is credible, is free, and it's violence free. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Adekunle, for that contribution. You mentioned, let me just as a follow-up, you mentioned that there might be increase in attack in the next few weeks. What are the factors that do you think will be responsible for this, and how can this be curtailed? How can this be curtailed?
Well, thank you. You know, Nigerian politicians approach elections like war, because not only Nigeria, across African continent, politicians tend to draw a direct relationship between elective office and economic security. So their own definition of contested election is that they must win. If they win, they would have won everything. If they lose, they would have lost everything. So they must ensure that they win. And in winning, they want to take everything into the battle, including killing, maiming, cannibal boss or anything. So when desperation becomes higher, there are tendencies for violence. And it is at this point that electoral, the armed services, security agencies have a responsibility to the Nigerian people to ensure that nobody is allowed to use organized violence to truncate the election. I'm sure that in the next few weeks, all the major contestants will be called around to come and sign the peace agreement. Once they commit themselves to that agreement, then we are not likely to have violence in the scale that may truncate the entire process. Thank you very much.
What's your take on these particular projects we are undertaking, and the objective of ensuring that we have informed decision from the electorate? So, what's your proposal and your suggestion to make the project of CEREDEM Africa and PAN to ensure that citizens and electorate take right decision when it comes to exercising their franchise?
Well, it will require CEREDEM and PAN to go extra mile by sending this report to critical stakeholders within the Nigerian political environment. You know, sometimes you might not blame people who insist on getting some token before they could exercise their franchise. It is simply because they appear to have lost faith in democracy in Nigeria. But if we give them a very sustained voter education, then we might be able to bring them back. Once they bring them back and they take ownership of the electoral process, where politicians will know that it will not be business as usual. Again, we should say that to a reasonable extent, there has been some measure of improvement on Nigerian democracy. But I still believe that we can do better than this in order to make democracy to work for the ordinary Nigerians, not for the privileged class. Thank you very much. Well, I think we should, it is very settled in the literature that one of the core deficits of democracy in Nigeria is lack of accountability. Those who occupy public office already have the psychology that they can almost do things and get away with them because they are hardly accountable to the ordinary people that voted them into power. For example, look at these constituency projects that lawmakers do in Nigeria. How much of engagement, how much of interaction takes place between the representative and the constituent, the people of his constituency, before they bring any project? Because the lawmakers feel that they are better exposed, they are better educated, they are well traveled than the people of their constituency. So they can go ahead and commit their constituencies even without engaging them. So that is the driver of the relationship between between politicians and people in Nigeria. They don't really see it as a threat that people will compel accountability from them. And because of that, they believe that once they get to power, they can misbehave and misbehave. But when the next round of election is coming, they will find their way back to the constituencies and use money or any other instrument of influence to get the support of the people. But we should also say that those of us that are educated elite, we are not also helping matters. Many of us are less interested in how we can compare accountability from our leaders. Rather, we want to serve them as PA, as SA, as whatever, so that we can also have access to the state and the resources that are controlled by the state. Unless civil society organizations come together to map out strategies or on how Nigerian people can extract accountability from Nigerian politicians, I'm afraid the trend may continue like this for some time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Workers' migration or mobility cannot be restricted, particularly for qualified manpower in the society. The reality is that we need to just create the enabling environments. If we are to retain our best brains in this country, we need to create the enabling environment. If the environment is conducive, I can tell you sizable number of Nigerians who are qualified professionals will stay in the country. But the stark truth is, if you look at the cost of living and the living standard and the earnings capacity is dwindling every day. So that is one of the reasons why people are actually leaving. And the workspace is too toxic and is not conducive. Look at the academics. Look at them. I'll give my own personal example. My department, before we went on the national strike, we used to be around 10, 11 academic staff. Upon resumption, around 4 to 5 had left for the UK now. Another one is also planning by the end of this month to leave. And these are young brains that we've trained from their year 1 up to master's level. Now they are gone to the UK because the environment is not conducive. So I was in another department yesterday. I asked for somebody and I was told he has left also for the UK. So the environment is not conducive. If the environment is conducive, an average Nigerian will not want to travel abroad because the social composition of the society. But the environment is not conducive, the workspace is not conducive, and there's nothing anybody can do at the moment to restrict. And the UK and other countries that have different policies is not by accident. When they were planning exiting the EU, they knew what they were doing. They knew where they could get the cheap labor. So they knew Africa, particularly Nigeria and other countries, could serve as that alternative, apart from the Asians. So what we need to do as the people in politics, in power, in government, is to create that enabling environment. If the enabling environment is created, people can stay back. In those days, we used to have people who go abroad, come back after their study to add value to the country. So we just need to create the enabling. Those are part of the narrative that we need to give hope, real hope to the youths and to the eggheads and the professionals. Most people that want to be nurses, doctors, teachers these days is because they want to travel abroad. So we need to create the enabling environment. If the security is there, if the job security is there, if their welfare is taken care of, and the future, look at the pension problem. And I think 2 days ago now, people that have contributed to pension after several years, it was not released until 2 days ago after the budget was signed, running into billions of naira. And you will see a young man looking at his father who could not access his contributing pension after working for several years. He will be dashed. The hope will be dashed. You have no choice than to look for an exit strategy abroad. So it just create the work environment, respect the International Labour Organization rules, and create the work environment to be conducive, create employment. Most people are underemployed. A lot of people are not even employed. So if that is done, a number of people, we are lucky, we have the YouTube population, and they are well educated, so they will be retained in the system. When I was with the National Assembly, I worked with a committee of the National Assembly closely on economic recovery when we went into recession in 2016, 2017, thereabouts. I think the challenge is that we are not looking at the global space. We want to operate as if we are not working in the global space. I think that's one of the issues that need to be on the front burner, because the prediction of the World Bank that there will be global is true. The data are showing to that effect. So to survive, one of the things we may need to do, spending, to cause unnecessary spending, particularly cost of governance. If we cut the cost of governance, government can free the little resources for the good of the people. People can, if they divert the resources to the little available resources to productive sectors, then there will be consumption, there will be investment, even consumption from government end for productive purpose. So we need to just first tighten the loopholes, the extractive institutions, and the extractive elements in government, reduce the cost of governance, because there won't be inflow, external flow from oil revenue in particular. If we follow the news, we'll see even Afghanistan and China, they are having a deal for 24 years. China will be exploring oil from Afghanistan, meaning that one of the major buyers from Nigeria, which is China, may not be buying, because it may be more expensive buying from Nigeria when Afghanistan is just a neighbor. So apart from that, the Russian-Ukraine war is another issue that we have not taken opportunity. The money we are supposed to make, have money in the sovereign wealth fund that we can fall back on when recession actually come to play. So if basically what Nigeria needs to do, planning for that global recession, is cut cost of governance at all levels, from the local, from the subnationals, and to the federal level. If we cut cost of governance, we can save more. We can use the little resources that are available for productive purposes. Then there are some idle assets that the government can actually liquidate in preparing for that global. There are a lot of idle national assets that the government can actually liquidate and get revenue that the government can use to actually prepare for the global recession. Another aspect is that collections from companies, from multinationals in particular. NAETI just released his audit reports showing that a number of those multinationals, a number of companies, they have outstandings they are supposed to pay. If all those revenues are raking and they are well managed, apart from other external flows that will come into the economy, I think we are in better position to actually prepare for the global recession. It's just cutting the costs. Whatever that is available, you manage it sufficiently and look for alternative sources to raise revenue. If you could, there are sources government can use to raise revenue. If you look at this current year budget now, government is planning to make revenue from federal government entities, and they also plan to sell some assets, some national assets, that the cost of managing those assets is even on the high side. Not issue of privatization now or commercialization. There are some idle national assets that the government need to sell that they can use to raise huge revenue to prepare for the global economic recession. So I think by and large, we can actually survive. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes,
You
Adekunle.
said that the citizenry are not engaging politicians on accountability, and that the elites are disconnected, they are not actively involved. And I want to know, I do not have any research, but I feel, having been in the midst of people, I feel it's is it more as a, I'm asking him as a researcher because he would have more evidence. Is it more of not wanting to hold the people accountable, or a fall in the moral value system and apathy? More the the drop in the moral value that we are in our moral compass, which translates into apathy, is that I think I'm asking if research has supported that as a major driver for lack of holding people, our officials, accountable in governance. Because I don't think it's not lack of knowledge that is not making the citizenry hold politicians accountable. It's because there is no system, there are no structures in place. So I don't know what research, what evidence we have around that. That's my question.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, there are two issues that are involved here. The first one is what the person that asked the question talked about, which is the structure of accountability. There are actually structures of accountability. There are mechanisms that are developed into the Constitution to make those who hold public office to account. But in Nigeria, the reality is that those mechanisms have not been put into good use. If you look at the people at the grassroots, on their own part, they lack the empowerment to take those who are in public office to account. It is in that case that they have to rely on the activities of these society organizations who can track public officials, what they do, how they perform their responsibilities in order to make them to account to the people. That is one. So there are structures, but the structures have not been well explored. The second issue is that ordinary people tend to disengage from politics in Nigeria gradually because of their experience that the politicians have not done enough for them. That once they get to public office, they are not likely to do what they promised. And so if they are not going to do it, why do we need to waste our time in engaging them? Our politicians have come to exploit that too. That if they are not making us to account, then we can as well do business as usual. But it is true that if we do not have very strong accountability mechanisms in Nigeria, their democracy may not work for the poor. Thank you very much. Well, the line of communication between politicians and the people, once it goes beyond the traditional media, like newspaper and radio, then the people might not be in a position to be fully engaged. When we talk of Twitter, Facebook, these are elitist platforms that are meant for people in our home class. But for ordinary people on the street, the best medium to engage them should be the radio, or at most, not even newspaper, the television. If politicians make promises on radio and the TV, they will sink, or if they pass messages on radio and TV, the information will sink more into the people than if the information is posted on social media platform. I want to believe that if politicians actually mean well for the Nigerian people, then they should be able to pass much of the information through the traditional channels so that people can engage this and people can also take them up on these issues. Thank you.
Your last words as we conclude today's discussion.
I just want to use this medium again to thank PAN and CEREDEMS for this opportunity, and also the team that actually works specifically on this project. I think it's a good project, and the engagement should continue. And this also affords us opportunity to also look in the direction of accountability framework that post-election, some of these promises the politicians have made, how do we follow up to ensure that it translates to development for our people? And evidence-based research of this kind will be very important for the political actors to be more accountable. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to serve on this panel.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mojeed, your final words as we wrap up on today's discussion.
Thank you very much, moderator. I also thank the CEREDEMS-PAN for this worthy cause. They are making their own investment into the consolidation of the Nigerian democracy, and we should commend that. They have started well, and we wish them the best as they go through the critical period of the election. I also want to appeal to those of us who are into civil society organizations that we should please mobilize our people for the purposes of collecting their PVC. It's as if political parties are not doing enough. INEC has been doing that, but if society organizations can join them, I think we will have an increase in the level of people who have collected their PVC. Thank you very much.